Welcome to the Make Work Not Suck podcast.
Ryan, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about the health versus the hustle. We're seeing a lot of studies come out recently that are showing that executives and white collar workers, knowledge workers need a lot more sleep and self-care to be productive. But I don't know how many companies have caught up to that yet. We're still seeing a hustle culture where people want to see hours and, responding to text messages and emails at all hours of the night. So how do we balance the health versus the hustle? I heard about an article recently that was talking about CPAP machines for sleep apnea and why getting a CPAP machine might be the highest ROI business move you can make. Thoughts? Do you even know what a CPAP machine is? You might be too young.
I struggle with the statement, especially when it says, get a used one. I'm like, I don't know anybody that wants to get a used CPAP machine to get their sleep back in order. But
well, let's start with the bigger picture though. The health versus the hustle.
I do think there's a level of just hustle harder, especially in the younger generation. And I think this can fall into the topic as well, is you've got the 20-year-olds that'll just hustle their way into a health problem.
And I don't think that's a generation thing. I think that's an age thing. So I think boomers and Gen Xers and Gen Y, we all did this when we were in our 20s. We didn't take enough vacation days. We pulled all-nighters, and you can do that when you're in your 20s, but it catches up with you eventually.
I do think there's a difference in America now is I think the younger generation is less so than the previous generation.
Okay.
I think that the biggest hustler generation was definitely the boomers, but
yeah, boomers were generally grinders.
Not to say that the millennials are less grinders or the Xers are less grinders. I think the Gen Zs are better about taking PTO than anybody else, but that's a whole different topic. Going back to the CPAP machine, I mean, I think it comes down to like good sleep.
Yeah. Are
you getting good sleep? Because if you get good sleep, then you could be you have more energy, more focus, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess the question is in the context of, the family business side, like how much are parents expecting their kids to hustle and it's actually destroying their health in their business?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there is this in many organizations, there's this unspoken expectation that hours equal commitment. And I think that hours is not really the right metric. Because I noticed this even when I was working for corporate, like in a 40-hour week, let's just say I worked 40, which, generally I would probably work more, but in a 40-hour week, there was probably 5 to 10 of those hours where I was just amazing, right? Like I was worth 2 to 3 what they paid for me. And then there was probably about 20 hours where I was doing my job, but I wasn't, setting any records. And then there was probably about 5 to 10 hours a week that I was completely worthless. And I think that's probably true of most employees is that over a 40-hour week, there's probably 10 hours that you're doing a lot of great things that are adding a lot of value. 20% of the time you're going through the motions, and, 10% of the time you should probably be fired because you're just standing around drinking coffee, chatting with your coworkers and not doing anything productive. That's kind of what a lot of jobs are. And so if you think that every one of those 40 hours is created equal, you're not really thinking about it correctly. That you added most of your value that week in those 10 hours. Now you still got to be there for 40 and, whatever. But one of the things I'm finding is that I don't necessarily need all 40 hours to add that much value. And so I think it's because energy, focus, clarity, like if you have those things, you can add 40 hours worth of value in a lot less time, but then you're going to need more time to recover.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely been a big health wave boost
Mm-hmm.
And everybody knows sleep.
Yeah.
We suck at it, but between like the Whoop and the Aura Ring, and now Apple has
Mm-hmm.
sleep functions built in, and I'm sure there's a dozen other devices on the market that can do it as well. But we know sleep is important, and we've got trackers that yell at us, yet we still fall back to habits of hustle.
As a founder, and I'm pretty sure you're not good at this, why do you not sleep as much as you should?
Well, I have a great excuse,
Okay.
and that is, and by excuse, I mean like a horrible one,
Okay.
is too committed, too involved in too many things.
Okay.
Um, I think the big one is like, and I think it's also time of life, right? Because when my kids were much younger and they went to bed at 8 o'clock at night or 7:30, I
Right.
had more time to work on things versus my kids are going to bed at 11 o'clock now. And so,
Mm-hmm.
9, 10 o'clock, there's interactions. Um, context switching between multifunctions, between, writing code, running a company, consulting on this, doing podcast, yada, 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 yada.
Yeah.
I would say in the earlier days, it was a lack of prioritization and time management versus now, like getting 7 hours of sleep is bad for me. So
How so?
that 7 hours is good. So
Oh, I was going to say, is it because you need 9 and you're only getting 7, or
my
why is it?
yeah, my issue now is more the erratic schedule, but
Mm,
I do prioritize enough where I am getting 7 hours of sleep. So it's like I got to be lights out by midnight,
mm-hmm.
by 7 a.m. If I'm going to get up at 6 a.m., I've got to be up, in bed by 11,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. So much more disciplined. My biggest issue is it ranges from 10:30 to midnight, like
Yeah.
on an inconsistent schedule,
Yeah.
which screws with the pattern. So at least I'm in a better state. I'm focused on getting 7, but
I think one of the challenges for a lot of professionals who work with family members is that the line between work and home gets really blurry. And it's tough to get away from work and recover when your coworkers are always around you because they're your family, right? You live in the same house as your coworkers. And so having some level of boundaries that can help you say, hey, this is not work time, or hobbies, or something that gets you out of the house, anything that can help you recover is going to make you a better employee and going to make work not suck because you're able to recover. And I think most people don't know what they do to recover, what they should do to recover. And so we just kind of keep grinding and keep grinding. And then we see all the mental health issues that are just so pervasive right now. So I think it's very important to be able to take a break from work. And it is doubly important if work and home have the same people there.
agree. I mean, I think it's more. I think that's definitely more for like a husband and a wife. I think that's less so for like, parent child. I mean, not saying that it's
Mm-hmm.
not the exception to the rule where they live together, but usually by the time I mean, a teenager working for their parent is a very different situation than this is your full-time career, you're out of college, et cetera, et
Mm-hmm.
cetera. And yeah, you may live with them for that small period of time in your early 20s while you're getting things going, but probably not for long. So I think that's probably more for a husband wife duo.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think in that case, that one is, yeah, can you shut it off? Like when your coworkers, when you don't live with your coworkers, you can shut it off when you go home. Unless you're a workaholic, then you just keep it going, but that's a different problem. Versus
Right.
when your spouse, when your evening conversation is just continuing the business discussion, when do you shut your brain off?
Yeah. Would you rather hire an employee who only gets 4 hours of sleep a night, or an employee who's always 2 glasses of wine in?
Ooh.
Because the studies show that 4 hours of sleep makes you function like you're a couple of drinks in.
I think I'd rather have, I mean, it depends on when they're having the wine. Like if they're having their wine at, midnight, or they're having their wine at 6.
No. I mean, like around the clock, they've always got two glasses of wine in them, right? So they're functioning in a permabuzz. That is what the research shows. That's what you are like if you're working on 4 hours of sleep.
I believe it.
It's you're as functional as somebody who's permanently buzzed.
Well, and I agree, but I think the big one is like at some point your body's going to crash.
Oh yeah.
And so I like 4 hours of sleep is not the problem. It's the people that are getting 5.5, barely 6, and they're just barely shortchanging their body enough to maintain momentum. Versus if you're going on 4 hours of sleep, unless you've got that weird genetic gene where you actually can do that.
I worked for a guy once like that. It was crazy.
Yeah. At 4 hours over the course of a week, you're going to be crashing. But I think is even more dangerous is there are those people that will run the whole week like that and sleep through the weekend or catch up on their sleep on weekend, and then they grind through the week. And
does that actually work?
No,
I don't think it does.
You get productivity out of like Monday and Tuesday, but by Wednesday you're burned out again, and then you're pushing yourself through, and you're still in a negative sleep. So it's a perceived high,
and
you're just destroying your health.
You're destroying your health, and I think you're destroying a lot of the things around you, right? Like a leader who's operating on that much sleep is not attuned to what's going on around them. They are not a good version of themselves. They're going to have more conflict. They're going to have more miscommunications. They're going to have sloppy decisions, and it's going to create rework. Like you should just go home and go to bed. I would rather have a rested executive give me 4 really good hours than an exhausted executive give me 12 crap hours.
Oh, it's been proven your cognitive ability to think strategically just goes like you're not capable of doing anything but executing.
Right.
Your error rate is through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not doing anybody good. I mean, that's why one of the best things you can do is good sleep.
Yeah.
Just shut it off. It'll be there tomorrow. Get good sleep, wake up, and you will be more productive. It's the red line versus green line. It's the perceived value. If I power through this, then I can get done. Well, there's always going to be something on the to-do list tomorrow. The to-do list is always going to grow. And all you're going to do is have an actual value that's low versus take the time, disconnect, discharge, get the rest. You'll come back fresher, smarter, more efficient, and you'll get through the to-do list probably by the same time you would have done it killing yourself.
Yeah. The exception is if you work on an assembly line and just, kind of stand there and watch pill bottles whiz by, you're digging ditches, you're doing something that requires very little cognitive effort. You can push yourself harder. But if your job requires you to make decisions, to interact with people, with empathy, if it requires you to make strategic decisions, if it requires you to be creative in any sense, right? Whether that's technically creative or visually creative, anything that requires empathy, creativity, strategic thinking, or interacting with others, sleep is more important than hours. The only exception is just pure manual labor, which, look, there's a lot of people that do that. I actually enjoy that every once in a while. You can do that on less sleep, but if you need to be creative, strategic, influential, or interacting with people, prioritize sleep more.
Make work not suck. Our podcast that talks about exactly that. Our process, vision, journey, culture, and results. We present real-world business solutions that make the difference. Our goal is to make work not suck. Hosted by Ryan Hodges, co-host Daniel Steer. Join us each episode and make work not suck.